Your evidence for the state?
Yes, Your Honor. The state would call Julie Harrell.
Place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Mr. Faucitt?
Thank you, Your Honor. Afternoon. Please state your name.
Julie Elizabeth Harrell,
All right. Where do you live, Ms. Harrell?
6641 Tealbriar Drive in Raleigh.
All right. Are you married?
Yes.
What's your husband's name?
Bill Harrell.
All right. And how about your family?
I have 3 little girls now.
Okay.
I have
Is
about almost 3 months old. And then I have Lucy, and she is now 10 and a half, and Anna, who's 8 and a half.
What do you do for a living, Ms. Harrell?
I'm a nurse, and I work in clinical trials doing research.
And what does your husband, Bill, do for a living?
He does real estate.
Directing your attention to April 22nd, 2013. Before that date, did you know either Jamie or Nation Hahn?
No.
Okay. Did you know the Cabes?
Yes.
Okay. And the Cabes reside in relation to your house where?
Diagonally across the street.
Okay. If you would, please, let me, Your Honor, this time could I publish back State's Exhibit 19?
Yes, sir.
So, State's Exhibit 19 here. Is this a picture of your house behind you? Over your left shoulder?
Yes.
Okay. If you would, please walk us through in as much detail as you can that Monday afternoon, sometime after 5 o'clock, April 22nd, 2013.
Okay. That day I was working from home, and my husband always works from home. It's about 5:15 or so. I just started cooking dinner. I was still on the computer. I was in the kitchen. And I think I was IMing my manager at the same time when everything started happening. Both my daughters at the time, they were 6 and 8, and decided they want to make some extra money. So they decided they want to clean the windows and mop the floor. So they had the windows, the blinds drawn, and the two, where the ferns are, they had those blinds pulled up, and they were Windexing the windows. About a week prior, we had had a guy come by after dark trying to sell magazines. So we had a big lecture about not answering the door when the doorbell rings, to let mommy or somebody else answer the door. So I was in the kitchen, which is kind of behind the front door, and then my daughters started yelling that someone's at the door, someone's at the door. And you could hear it was kind of chaotic. And I guess they had seen someone run up to the door, which ended up being Nation from the door. At that point in time, I could see the door's glass, so I could see Nation there at the door. If I remember correctly, he was wearing like a white T-shirt. His hair was kind of a mess. He had a little blood splattered on his T-shirt, and he was yelling frantically. So I had no idea what was happening, but our stairs to go up to the bedrooms are right behind that glass. So the first thing I did was I took both girls, I locked the back door to the screened-in porch, the door to the garage, ran to the front door where the steps are, pushed them behind me, sent them upstairs quickly and told them to lock their door and to stay there until someone came to get them. So about that time, my husband's office, you see the big window upstairs was where his office was. He had heard the commotion as well. So he was coming down the steps about the same time as I was reaching towards the door. And I looked at the door. Nation was yelling out, "Help, someone please help my wife." So at that time, we were both there at the door at the same time. I looked out and I saw, I guess, Jamie, or a figure laying at the bottom of the front steps. And she was laying where you see those bags and the towels there. So when I looked down, I could see that she had blood on her. So I quickly sent Bill back up to get some towels. He ran up and grabbed a few beach towels and then was back downstairs again. We didn't know what had happened. I just assumed that someone had probably been hit by a car or a bike accident. I didn't know anything yet. So when we got down to the bottom of the steps, I had the towels. I knelt down so that my head was right by Jamie's head. And Nation, we asked Nation what happened, and she said that she had been stabbed, which then took us both back by surprise. No one expects to hear that.
Who said they'd been stabbed?
Nation.
Nation
So that
said
she had.
been stabbed. Okay, go ahead.
So, because, like I said, I thought it was a car accident or she'd been hit by a car, and so he quickly let us know that. So at that point in time, I think Bill ran back inside and then was back out again. Because I think Bill asked who stabbed her, what do you mean she's been stabbed? And he said, so my best friend. And Bill said, well, where is he now? And he said, well, he's still in the house. So I think, not that I can speak for him, but from what he said, I mean, his gut reaction is to protect his family and protect who's in the yard. So Bill ran back inside and was back down again. And he, from there on out, was kind of checking the perimeter of the yard.
He went and got a firearm?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So, let's see, I guess about the same time period, too, he had his phone. He was dialing 911. Angie was over from across the street. She was dialing 911, and Angie happened to win and got it first. So then Angie started with 911. She was kind of pacing up and down on the sidewalk, just that cobble sidewalk, by the mailbox, talking to 911 and asking questions.
Or still Briar on the mailbox, your mailbox?
Right. And then I was on the ground next to Jamie and was trying to figure out where her wounds were. So she was saturated from her waist down. Her eyes, her pupils were really, really, really small. She was conscious. She was able to talk and respond. But she had another wound up around this area that was not bleeding at all.
That area being what?
It seemed like it was around her, if I remember correctly, somewhere around her neck area. I remember seeing like tissue, but there was no blood. So my immediate thoughts was that she's already bled significantly because there was no more blood coming out. From looking at her, too, I thought that most likely she had been stabbed in the back because she had all the blood on her pants. Okay. She had a lot of blood.
Sustained. Go ahead.
She had a lot
Just tell us what you saw.
Sure.
What you saw and continue.
So, well, I guess the relevance of that was it looked like there was a lot of blood, but I couldn't see where it was coming from. So I didn't want to turn her because I was scared if I turned her, that would offset her fluid balance. When I was in nursing school, I turned a patient who was, and that made the patient pass away. So I've always had this fear of that, I think. And so I was scared to turn her. So I put the towels kind of over her, around her, and then I held on to the wound that was on this side. And then I was about as close as I am to the microphone to Jamie's face to try to maintain and lock eye contact with her. During the same time period, Nation was in the yard, kind of frantically pacing around the yard, and he told her that he loved her. She was able to say, "I love you" back. He talked about the beach. We'll go back to the beach. And then he was still kind of frantically around the yard. But when I say around the yard, he was still close. He was, if I remember correctly, everything was happening between that one tree and where she was laying down. So, and then he asked at some point, did you confront him? Did you confront him? If we step back for a second, when Bill asked your best friend, who's your best friend, what do you mean he did it? The nation told us Jonathan's name. So, to the best of my recollection, when Jamie was laying there and he asked, did you confront him? Did you confront him? She kind of looked in Nation's direction, but I can't recollect if she said yes or no, but you could tell there was a change in her. And that's when I told Bill, get Nation away, because all I could think about was if her blood pressure starts going up or she gets too excited, we're going to lose her faster. She's going to lose more blood. So then Bill kind of was trying to calm down Nation, and I was continuing to lock eyes on Jamie. And about that time, I mean, it seemed like forever. I don't know how many minutes it was. I think Angie was still talking to 911, and that's when I got out to Angie that we were losing her, that she was fading fast, and they needed to hurry up and get there. And then during all this, there was another lady who was riding her bicycle. She's a bicyclist, and she had stopped to help. She was just randomly on a route by our house, coming down Rainwater. She stopped to help, and she and I think Angie's husband Kenny helped with propping Jamie's legs up on those leaf bags that you see. So her legs were propped up, and then Jamie was still able to lock eyes with me, and every now and then you could kind of see her fade out, and she was focusing on that one bush that's right there behind the bags. You could kind of see her kind of fade out to that, and then I'd call her name back again. And I didn't know her name before, so I guess I learned her name from Nation saying her name over and over again, and she was able to lock back eyes with me, so I knew she was still with me. And I would confirm, are you with me? Are you still here? You're still here. You can do this. And then about then, my kids came downstairs. I could hear my kids coming to the door screaming and yelling. Apparently, they thought that I was hurt. Because keep in mind, I sent them upstairs before we ever knew what had really happened. We just knew there was somebody at the door, screaming on the door. So then the lady on the bicycle sent the kids back inside and took care of them. And then about that time, Jamie was telling me that she couldn't breathe anymore. So she was having real quick breaths. Her pulse wasn't. It's a real thready pulse. But you couldn't really feel it anymore. It was kind of fading, and I just kept locking eyes with her and telling her, "Don't leave me. Stay right here. You can breathe. We're going to slow down. We're going to do this together." And I can remember we're going to breathe together. We're going to breathe together. And then you could tell her they were just getting more and more shallow. And all I could think was, "Oh no, should I start CPR? What should I do?" And about that time, the EMS pulled up, and before the ambulance came, it's either ambulance or a fire truck came, I remember seeing the police down the street from where Jamie and Nation had said they had lived, because I didn't know where they lived. And about that time, there were tons of police cars, and they had their guns pulled. I didn't focus as much on that because I was more focusing on Jamie. And then I remember seeing the EMS guy or the fire truck, whoever it was, coming up. I remember this really well, and he was slowly donning one glove. And I was like, she needs your help, and she needs it now. And then once he realized, I think, that it really was a critical situation, then things happened fast. And at that point in time, another ambulance came. They put Jamie on a gurney, and then they sent her off. After she left, the Nation was still there, still in a panic. Nation's finger, maybe it was his right, one of his fingers was severed. Kind of seemed like it was barely hanging on. That's where his blood was coming from. And then we made sure that he had some help to look at his finger. And then from there, I went back inside, I think, to check on the girls because they were still panicking, obviously, being young children. And then after that, I remember everything being roped off and there was police everywhere. The detective came in to talk to us. We had a detective talk to my daughters because they were scared. They didn't know if someone was going to come get them. They didn't know why it happened. So the detective talked to my daughters, Lucy and Anna, to let them know that it wasn't a random happening and that no one was going to get them. And then we couldn't leave our house because it was a crime scene. So we had bright lights outside our house until about 10:30 that night, so the girls couldn't sleep. We couldn't take our dog out. They wanted to go to our neighbor's house, and they weren't allowed to leave the house. So they were with us that night. And I think someone contacted us to let us know that Jamie was at the hospital. Or the detective told us that Jamie was at the hospital and that the WakeMed could work miracles. And so the girls went in bed that night thinking that I was some hero, that I saved some person's life. And then we found out the next night the evening we went to her vigil, and the girls wanted to go. So I guess it was the next day when the news media found out Jamie's name and got all the information, and that's when we learned we had no idea who Jamie Nation were. We had no idea what they were involved with or anything. And then they showed a couple of pictures of Jamie previously, and the girls recognized her because apparently Jamie had stopped to buy lemonade from them. They always want to make money, so they're always selling something in the front yard. So Jamie had stopped, I think, a couple of times to buy lemonade. So they recognized her, and then quickly, Lucy, the oldest one, they kind of became a little obsessed with learning about her. So they pretty much demanded that we went to her vigil the following night. And then
Let me ask you this. Let me take you back, Sarah. When you were describing where Jamie Hahn was lying down, was she facing that bush, facing your house near where the leaves are? You said she was seemed to be concentrating often on that bush behind the bag.
So her head
if
was.
You need to stand up and point something.
So her head was around about right here, and her feet were propped up right here. And I was on the step side of her. So I was laying down like this over her.
That was thank you. That was my next question. Where were you in relation? You said you were looking at her in the face, and at the same time, correct me if I'm wrong, holding.
So I had one. So if this is her head and her shoulders, so basically I was laying like this over her and had my hand kind of on her neck kind of area and then holding her. I had one hand down where I felt like her wounds probably were, trying to put pressure kind of wherever I could guesstimate it.
And she was communicating at times with you?
Mainly when she said she couldn't breathe.
You heard her tell Nation she loved him?
Yes.
And what was the quality of her voice or the strength or
That was earlier on when they were first got there, and that's when Nation was talking to her. And she had a southern voice. I'd never heard her speak before, and she clearly said, "I love you," in a very southern drawl.
Nation Hahn was rather frantic out there?
Yes.
And your testimony is you heard Mr. Hahn, Nation Hahn, ask Jamie what about confront. Can you tell us that again?
He asked her, did you confront him? Did you confront him?
Did he say it on more than one time?
I think he said it twice.
Okay. And do you know what he was talking about at that time or while he was there in your front yard as law enforcement's responding, if you know?
I think he and Bill may have had a side conversation about it. I was more focused on Jamie and trying to make sure that we didn't lose her. I just heard him say, did you confront him? Did you confront him? And that's when she kind of, her whole, it seems like that's when she looked over towards him, and then that's when she started kind of having a harder time.
Is this around the time you asked your husband to take Nation kind of away from the immediate area of you and Jamie?
It's like, yeah, I told him to take Nation and calm him down because I felt like that was getting Jamie excited.
Thank you, Ms. Harrell. I have no more questions.
Mr. Arbor.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Harrell. My name is Joseph Arbor. I'm an attorney, and I have some questions about your testimony. Okay? If I'm not, you can't hear me at any time, you're not sure about something that I may ask you, don't hesitate to ask me to rephrase it or ask it in a way that may make more sense.
Could you turn your microphone on, sir?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Girls this opportunity to make some money doing this chore. So was it just unclear? Did they see Jamie or did they see Nation at the door?
They saw Nation at the door, and it's from the best that I can tell from them, they never saw Jamie come across the yard. So they were there looking out the front window for a good probably 5 minutes before Nation came to the door.
You don't know when Jamie got there.
I don't know when Jamie got there, but they don't recollect ever seeing Jamie. Believe me, we asked them a lot. We went to a counselor, the whole thing, because that would be pretty terrible for a 6-year-old to see such an event. So they, from the best that I can tell, and talking with their school counselor and their counselors and their teachers and to them, that they actually never saw Jamie. They saw Nation.
Which is a good thing. I mean, not that Nation was bleeding too. Right?
It's a good thing.
I mean, It's better that none of this was good for them to see. Agreed?
Right. And nor being locked in a closet and in a room and not knowing when to come out. So that's...
Sure, the whole thing was like a terrorizing event, I'm sure, for them.
Yes.
And for you. Because I know you're a nurse, but you at that point in time, and sort of indicated by your testimony, your first instinct was your mom. Your first thought was the girls.
Right.
You went, so that's what I'm asking. You were in the kitchen. The girls, that's what I'm asking. You said they sort of recognized Jamie.
They
She had
recognized...
purchased lemonade from them or something?
They recognized her once they saw her pictures on the news.
Not that
And then they
day.
said, we've seen her. She bought lemonade.
Okay.
So not that day.
Okay, so not that
That was
day.
once they saw it on TV and they saw Jamie.
Gotcha. So in other words, if if she had come, it doesn't sound like she came to your door then, from the best that you can ascertain.
I don't think so.
Okay. The girls certainly didn't say anything to you indicating that.
No, and there was blood across the yard where she had come across the yard. There was not blood up on my doorstep from there. I don't recollect seeing any unless there was a splatter, maybe from Nation's finger, but.
When was this? When they alerted you? Was it like, mommy, come to the door? Was it a screaming thing? I mean,
It was screaming.
Okay, they were screaming. They
were scared.
Yeah, because suddenly there's like this stranger who's being frantic in front of them in the door, right?
Right.
So let me see if I got it straight. So you went from the kitchen to where they were first, right?
So where the kitchen is, there's an island in the kitchen. I had my laptop open and I was working. I had just turned the stove on to start dinner as well. All you have to do is kind of angle yourself like that, and you can see the front door. Uh-huh. So by the time they started screaming, "There's somebody, mommy, there's somebody at the door," then I went like that, and I could see this man at the door.
And that day you've indicated you didn't know the Hahns prior to that day.
No.
Now I'll ask you this question. Because you said you knew the Cabes who lived across the street. How long had you lived in the neighborhood at that point?
I'd probably lived there maybe a year. My husband's been there for about 5 at that point.
Okay.
So I didn't know the Cabes that well at that point either. We'd spoken a few times, but.
And that's sort of what I was going to get to. So you know how sometimes you live in a neighborhood and you see people, you know they live in the neighborhood, you know they belong to a house or something, but you don't necessarily know them. You might not know their name or anything.
Right.
That day, the Hahns, they didn't even fit that category. These were people you didn't see, you didn't know. For all you knew, they came up out of a car somewhere.
Right.
All right. They were total strangers.
Right.
All you know is you got some stranger at the door, help,
Yes.
looking for assistance. And at that point, okay, so I didn't mean to stop you. You looked around the corner and you saw him. So you went to the door is that where the girls were?
So at that point, I put the girls behind me.
So you did go to the
I
front.
walked forward to go, the stairway to go upstairs, to go up to their bedrooms, lands right at the front door. That's a lot of houses, right? So I was walking up the hallway to the front door where I could see them through the glass, and had the girls behind me, kind of holding them like this. Then I walked in front of the stairs, me still facing forward, and told them to turn around and run upstairs.
Okay.
And told them to go in their room and lock their door.
Okay.
Until someone comes to get them.
There was a point I thought I heard you say you locked the back door.
Oh, yes. So when they first started screaming, the way the house is set up, the kitchen, there's a door that goes down. We have a basement garage. So there's a door that goes down the steps to the basement garage, which is part of the kitchen.
Your driveway comes off of rainwater, right?
That's right.
Okay.
So I immediately flipped the deadbolt, and then I took about 2 more steps and made sure the door was locked to the back porch as well, that deadbolt.
Before you went up front to where the girls were?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Before the girls ran around to the kitchen, the central part of the house is the staircase. So there's a staircase, and then the den flows into the kitchen, which then flows up through the hallway to the front, right? So they were able to come from the 2 glass windows this way to the kitchen. So they didn't go in front of the front door. They because we went through that the previous week where some man was trying to sell magazines and it was dark and they were scared. So the rule was you don't answer the door to a stranger, you come and get us. So they didn't want to go near the glass door. So they came the back way to get me.
And that's something I was going to ask. I don't know if the porch light is on in that picture that's behind you at the front of your house. I don't know if it shows it, but I believe there's what do they call this? It's not your security door. It's like a storm door in front of the security door.
The door itself, it's just one door and it has glass.
Okay, so you can see through it. Is it a big pane of glass or?
No, just the top, probably maybe the top third. glasses from here to here.
Sort of like half the door, maybe, or
Maybe.
not quite half the
Not
door?
quite half.
Okay, so, the door was closed,
The door's always closed.
so, again, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm guessing that the girls are 6 and 8 at the time, so they're smaller, so they're looking up at the glass at that point, and they would have probably just seen Nation Hahn's face, maybe, or
Maybe. I don't think, I think what they, keep in mind, they were right here and right here with 2 large windows.
oh, right, that's right, with the windows
With the blinds
shades
drawn up. And they're wiping the windows. They're doing the window washing, right?
so they could have seen him
So
from the window.
they saw somebody come up from there. I don't know what angle. I never asked them where they saw him come from.
Gotcha.
But they saw him first come there up to our porch.
Your door, your security door, was closed at that point.
So the front door is only one door, and it was closed. We have a dog who likes to escape, so the door's always closed.
Is it locked?
Yes, we always keep our door locked.
So anybody outside wouldn't have been able to walk it, just open it up and walk in anyway.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it was locked.
Okay. So you get the girls, you usher them upstairs. And you didn't take them upstairs, you just said go upstairs and lock yourself in.
Right.
Okay. Now, okay. And when they're going up, and you're heading back to the door, I think you said that's about the same time your husband Bill.
So when they're going up the steps, there's probably a couple of feet, maybe a few feet from the base of the staircase to the front door.
Okay.
So once I see out of my peripheral vision that they're up the steps, that I go towards the door. I haven't opened it yet. I'm assessing what's going on through the door. So I see this man, please help me, help my wife.
Yeah,
And
your first thought was take care of the girls. You got to
Right.
think about yourself now.
So about that same exact time, my husband's office is upstairs, so he can see as well, right? And his desk faces a window.
Right.
So I think he helped get the girls in the room and pretty much said what I said: lock the door, stay there, and stay safe. Get in the closet, and stay safe. So he was basically down the steps in about a half of a second. So we're both there at the same time as we're starting to open the door.
Okay. Where his office was, he can see out in the yard and stuff. He can't see what's going on the porch, right?
He can't see what's going on the porch, but we weren't he couldn't see Nation
Right.
banging on the door.
That
No.
was my question. He wouldn't have been able to see Nation. Now at that point, then, it sounds to me like your husband and you are arriving at the door sort of around the same time.
About the same time.
Oh, okay. When you open the door, I don't know who opens it, you or your husband.
I don't remember. I think we're both there at the same time. And I can remember looking through the window and seeing Nation, and then I could see something down. You could see it's like looking right here. You can see there's something down there, but you can't tell what it is down there.
Because you're looking over the windows that are at the upper part of the door.
Yeah, and they're not that tall, but she's still a few steps down, so I can see something that wasn't there before on my sidewalk.
Right, you can see on the pictures all of a sudden.
Right.
Because you get the windows up and then you get the stairway down, so it would block your view a little bit. Now, I know there's some, and we'll get back to it, there's a point where your husband went and got his firearm, but not yet, right?
Not yet.
No. So you're just, now, husband's here, let's open the door, see what's going on. And when you open the door, Nation's there, he's standing there?
Yes.
Okay. And he's asking for help.
Yes.
Of course, you don't know him, and so conversely, he wouldn't have known you. Certainly wouldn't have known you were a nurse and had some medical training. But he's saying, is that when he's saying she's been stabbed?
No, he said, please help me, help my wife. So that's when we opened the door, looked out. I went down where she was. I don't know if I even stepped down quite yet, but I could see she was bleeding.
Right.
So I asked my husband to go get some towels quickly. So That's when he ran upstairs and grabbed some beach towels.
And that's when he grabbed his gun.
Not yet.
No, not yet. Okay.
No.
So he actually went upstairs, got some towels, and then came down with the towels.
Back down, right.
Okay.
So that was maybe at 1 to 2 seconds. It was quick.
At that point, do you recall seeing either Angela or Kenneth Cabe?
At that point, all I remember is seeing, at that point, there's a woman laying bleeding. And so I remember looking up, and Angie had her phone, and then my husband Bill had his phone. So we were, obviously your first reaction is to call 911. And then I was asking Nation what happened, what happened, because your gut instinct, your first thought would be a car accident or something.
Is this before you started to tend to her?
No, this is as I was going down to tend to her.
All right, so this is all happening
It's all happening at the same time, very simultaneously, yes.
Okay. So you're like going down her, and you're asking what happened because your emergency training and first aid knowledge says, because you want to know what you're dealing with.
Right.
Okay. When, excuse me. So your husband got the towels, came back. He still doesn't have the gun yet, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that's when you started to tend to Jamie, like you've testified about.
Yes.
Now, you understanding that I'm sure your focus was on her
Right.
and not really on what everybody else was doing. Do you know when your husband went and got the gun?
Pretty much. I know that when I asked what happened, and then Nation told me that she had been stabbed, I remember Bill kind of stepping back and, stabbed by who? What do you mean stabbed? And so that's when Nation said, it's my best friend, and and this is all. And Bill said, well, where is he now? Well, he's still in the house. That's when Bill went and got his gun, because here's some guy who stabbed someone who's still there. Who's to say he's not going to come back to finish the job, right? And so I think that was what he said. That was his thought process was, oh my goodness, we're all out here in this yard. There's someone with a knife who's by themselves, who's coming up behind my back. So yes.
Now, at this point, had Nation said yet, this was our best friend?
He was saying it all kind of at the same time. Yeah, he's our best friend. It's my best friend that did
He's
it.
saying a lot of things. correct?
Right.
You kind of in a panic.
Of course, yes.
You recall him saying, our best friend recently diagnosed with cancer. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that.
Okay. When you made a, of course, after this is over, there comes a point where there's a huge police presence in the area, correct?
Correct.
Along with the ambulances and everything else that's coming on the scene, correct?
Correct.
So there comes a point later on after Ms. Hahn and Mr. Hahn have been removed. You never did go. You didn't even know where they lived, right? At that point.
Well, by the time the police were holding their guns to a house, I knew where they lived.
You knew that's where the police had gone to.
Right.
But prior to that, you didn't know.
No, but prior to the whole incident, I didn't know where they lived.
Right. When the police were interviewing you, do you recall at one point, and you sort of said something about it when you were saying something about one of the EMT guys with like putting one glove on or something, and you told him like, now, do you recall telling the police officers at one point that the emergency people were taking a little too long to get there? It seemed like a long wait for them to get there.
It seemed like it took a little while.
In the time before they arrived, and meanwhile, until they arrived, until they took over, you were it. You were the person tending to Jamie Hahn, correct?
For the most part, the bicyclist helped out with propping her legs up, and Kenny, and then
Hey.
right, and then Angie was on the phone the majority of the time trying to relay information back and forth. So she was there at Jamie's side, and then she'd have to get back up and talk on the phone. She was a little bit back and forth, I think. And then after she got on the phone, I think she was right there beside us.
Is Hahn able to, you indicated there was a period of time there where she was talking with Nation, correct?
Yes.
And nobody, once you went out of the house, once you started to tend to her, nobody was closer to her than you. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And then you stayed with her up until the time that the emergency medical technicians arrived.
Yes. I made sure I was touching her the entire time.
And you said there came a point while she was with you, essentially under your care, where it was becoming hard for her to breathe. I think the phrase used was kind of gurgling. Is that correct?
She did get kind of. When she was saying, "I can't breathe," it got kind of gurgly. Yes.
And the pupils were pinpoint. I think was a word.
They were
used.
pinpoint the whole time.
And there was a point where you made mention to one of the officers that you weren't getting a pulse and you were afraid you had lost her. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And when she started to get to that's the point where she stopped communicating, correct?
She was still able to, when she was saying, "I can't breathe," she was real quick in her, she was like that, the way she was breathing. I was feeling for her pulse, and couldn't really feel much, but her eyes were locked with mine. At one point, you could tell she kind of was fading out. Her eyes were still open, and I told her, "Jamie, come back to me, look at me. And she was able to look back at me again. So she was responding. She could keep eye contact. And then it's like, breathe. We're going to breathe together. We'll do this together. And so she was able to kind of go as I was going. So I don't think we lost her at that point.
No, it wasn't suggesting that. But there did come a point where at least in the time you were with her, where her ability to communicate diminished significantly. Would that be fair?
That's fair. I think so.
And prior to that time, because I know you were asked the question about whether, you overheard something Mr. Hahn asking her, did he confront her or something? Did she confront him, I think was what he said, correct? She never gave a reply to that, correct?
She looked in his direction.
Right. But never replied.
No, I don't remember a response.
And she did say other things. She did say, I love you, correct?
That was when we were first started. She said, I love you. And then
There was a point in the very beginning she was communicating with you.
Yes.
And then there was a point where she was communicating. And when I say communicating, clearly in trauma, correct?
Yes.
Clearly in distress. I don't know. I know you're a clinical nurse, but I'm sure you've had some different trainings. Did you ever do any ER work?
No.
Okay. But you've had medical training. So when you were doing this, you were able, and that's sort of a first aid thing, right? Especially when you get someone with a serious injury, keep them talking to you because you want to keep them focused and keep them alert and awake, right? Which is what you were trying to do.
Yes.
And you were doing that with her. You were performing that function. Nobody was closer to her than you. You were the one doing that, correct?
Correct.
All right. And at no point in the time she was doing that did she ever say why this happened. Isn't that true?
No. I mean, yeah.
It's okay. You can clarify.
Okay.
She never said that.
She never said why anything happened. She never told me who did it. Nothing like that. That
never said
she wasn't
anything about
that conversational. It was never that conversational.
Right. She never said anything about, I just was asking so-and-so and he did this or none of that.
No. In fact, by the time she got to me or I got to her, let's say that way, she wasn't really even bleeding very much at that point. Her pupils were already pinpoint. It appeared that her blood loss had already taken place. That was what I was saying earlier about her wounds. I was trying to hold pressure on them, but there was really, I don't know if it was really, there was a point to it.
So there comes the point then when the EMTs arrive and they take over, correct?
Correct.
And they put, no, I don't know. At one point, I think you had indicated you were putting pressure on one of her wounds, or at least what you perceived to be one of her wounds, because she's clothed, correct?
She's clothed.
And I think the testimony was she's saturated in blood, correct?
From her waist down.
Waist down. And you were, I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, put your hand on an area of her clothing where you thought the blood was coming from to apply pressure.
So I tried to I kind of had my hand wrapped around her waist so that it seemed like there was something possibly in her abdomen area. I couldn't really tell. And then around her back. The blood was coming from somewhere, or it had come from somewhere. So I was just holding her the best I could with the hopes.
You were making your best estimate
Yes.
on where to do it because you were, I guess, hindered by the clothing, because this is not the time to be like stripping her down and looking for things. You just wanted to get, you knew help was coming because you knew that
Yes.
Angela Kay would call 911.
Yeah, I mean, I heard her talking at 911. That interchange was going on.
You're just trying to stabilize the moment. Fair?
Yes.
Now there does come this point where you said that the girls did leave the bedroom.
Yes.
And came downstairs. Was that still when you were tending to
Yes.
Ms. Hahn? So
I was on the ground, so their reaction was, which we figured out now. So all they knew, they saw Nation, some man at the door that was kind of crazy acting, is how they called it, right? Whose hair was all disheveled, and they knew that. And then when they came out, they saw what they thought was me on the ground, face down. So they thought
they were worried about you.
They didn't know that I was attending to someone else. They thought that this crazy man at the door had hurt me.
Ah, okay. So, which,
So that's
as
when
a
they
mom,
were.
you obviously don't want your daughters to have to deal with this thing.
Right.
But there comes a point after the ambulances have come and gotten Ms. Hahn and taken her away, and of course the police presence is remaining for quite some while. You testified they were putting up tape. They were multiple police cars. They're telling you don't leave your house right now. You got interviewed. Your husband gets interviewed. The girls got interviewed, correct?
There's bloody towels left on my sidewalk. There were their beach towels with their names, Lucy, on them, and Anna on them. They were their personal. Yes.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, this was a very traumatic event. But there comes a point, you said, where the girls, I'm not going to say relieved, but obviously realized you weren't a victim of the event, and realized that this is this young woman whose picture was being put on the news was someone they recognized as the lady in the neighborhood who comes and buys lemonade from their stand once in a while, correct?
Correct.
Right. Now, you didn't recognize her because you didn't know her. They did. So you mentioned something about then there was like this vigil service. Were you invited to that, or was it like open to the public and they said, let's just go, or how did that come about?
I don't remember. I know it's open to the public. I think we had probably been invited by the family at that point. We had a connection. So there was a mass email that went out to let everyone know where and when the vigil was.
Of course, the interviews on this thing didn't end that night. The police have been back and talked to you in days that followed that. You've been in contact with the district attorney's office. You've given interviews. You've been interviewed a number of times about this thing and wish it never happened, but you were thrown in the middle of this thing, correct?
Right.
All right. Do you remember on an occasion shortly after the event where a Detective Brady came out to talk to you?
Yes.
And in that meeting, when Detective Brady came out to talk to you, do you remember telling them that, telling the detective that you and your family had been invited to a family gathering for Ms. Hahn? And this was prior to this time that you're being interviewed by Detective Brady.
Well, there was a gathering around the time of the funeral that we attended.
Do you remember going to this family gathering and telling Detective Brady that you met with Nation Hahn and some of the other family members?
It was at their place of business, was where they had the gathering. There was friends and family that were there, and we met Nation.
You remember having that conversation with Detective Brady about telling him about that?
Vaguely, but I remember Detective Brady was the one who talked to my daughters and helped them, so we liked him and trusted him, yes.
You remember telling Detective Brady that when you were invited to that gathering that you and your family, you and your husband anyway, were given details of why this happened, details that you did not know prior to that evening?
I don't remember if that's at the point. I think that's when Nation shared with us what happened in the house prior to her coming to our yard. So during that time period after the incident happened, I guess that he'd come home from work, that whole part of the story, and what he heard, and how Jamie got out of the house.
You do remember having the interview with Detective Brady, correct?
Remember having an interview with him.
Might it help refresh your recollection?
Sure.
Did you look at any reports prior to testifying here today? Reports or documents or anything?
No.
Okay. Might it help refresh your recollection to read part of a report
Sure.
of your meeting with Detective Brady?
Yes.
All right. May I put you witness, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
I just marked as Defendant's Exhibit 6 for identification. Okay.
Okay.
Show you a portion of a report from Detective Brady from May 7th about a meeting he had with you. Take a moment and read this fifth paragraph and
Okay.
see if that refreshes your recollection at all with respect to your meeting with Detective Brady and telling him about that. In fact, I'm sorry, if you look up a little bit, it'll tell you the date. It was April 26th, I think, at
Okay. Right.
1:05 p.m., like at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay.
You
Right.
see that?
Okay.
Does that refresh your recollection some?
Mm-hmm.
It does? So do you recall then telling the detective that interview on the 26th of April, that you had been invited to the family gathering for the victim a day or so prior to giving this interview on the 26th?
Right. Okay.
And that you, at that interview, or you also told us that Brady at that gathering, that you met with Nation Hahn and some of the other family members.
Well, there were friends and family that were both there.
A lot of people.
Right.
And you remember telling Detective Brady that you were given details of why this happened?
Yes. As far as what this says, a part of this was my husband talking to him as well.
It's
So,
both of you. You're both being interviewed, correct?
correct.
And so when you're having this conversation with Detective Brady, you're both there.
Yes, but Bill, I mean, while we were there at the gathering, we were together for the most part, but sometimes we talked separately to people. So he may have heard things that I didn't hear at the gathering. Right.
But in the interview with Detective Brady on the
Yes.
26th, the two of you are there talking to Detective Brady on that day.
Yes.
And you're telling him, we were invited to this family gathering, correct?
Yes.
And that's when you're telling him we met with Nation and the other family members, correct?
Yes.
And that we were given details details that neither of you knew prior to entering.
Right.
You were told about the suspect being the Hahn's best friend, correct?
Correct.
About how he had worked for them, correct?
Correct.
You were told that they had recently found that he was possibly embezzling some money from the business, correct?
Correct. I don't remember that quite as clearly, but, and I think part of it is I don't remember how much of that was from media accounts, what my timelines were on that, but if I told the detective that, then that is correct.
And you told the detective that, they had recently found by embezzling money, but that they worked for the, they told you, the Hahns told you, they worked for the Democratic Party.
Not necessarily the Hans, but someone
No.
who was at the party, other
People at the
friends,
party.
right? Other people who worked with them, we talked to, right?
Right, that they were fundraisers, that they worked on Brad Miller's campaign, correct?
Your Honor, if there's not a reason not to be seated.
Yes, sir, if you want to resume your seat.
Sure, I can do that.
I think that part of that conversation was that we weren't as familiar of the intricacies of the Democratic Party, and so we had learned more while we were there.
At
We
that
didn't
meeting.
know, right? That wasn't.
You were told a lot of things at that meeting that you didn't know prior to that because you didn't know these people.
No, we really weren't that familiar with their line of work as well, with the Democrat within their political
All
affiliation.
of this, and that on the night that this happened, I mean, really, your time with Jamie was mostly in an emergency posture. I mean, you were providing first aid essentially, correct?
I didn't know, right? I didn't know who Jamie was until we saw it on the news. I didn't know anything about her.
And Nation Hahn was, as you said, I mean, he was frantically walking around, and you were just trying to keep him away, so as not to be a distraction to not necessarily keep him away, but trying to calm him down so as not to upset Jamie any further than she already was, because she was in physical stress, correct? Physical distress.
Right, but there was a change in her in the way that she was when he asked about the. It wasn't until he asked, "Did you confront him?" That's when she started becoming more. It appeared to be more stressed,
Right,
and
but
that's when I asked Bill, "Please, get Nation over there to calm him. Try to calm him down."
But she
I
didn't.
didn't say it quite that nicely.
She didn't say anything, correct?
I don't remember her saying. I can't recollect if she said anything. I told the detective that but I remember her looking in his direction and looking towards him.
And in the time that she was,
At this point in time, she wasn't able to.
right, I understand.
Okay.
And then, in the time that she was on the ground, she never said anything about what happened over at the house to you, correct?
If she did, I don't remember that.
And that on the night when this happened, you were interviewed by a number of police officers, correct?
We were interviewed predominantly by, I think, Detective Brady who was in our house mostly.
But you never told anybody that you heard her say anything about how this happened or the events of what happened at the house, correct?
I don't think so.
And you were, and then she was taken from you. So and then you told Detective Brady on the 26th of April that you'd been to this vigil thing that the family had and learned a lot of stuff that you didn't know about prior to going there. Isn't that correct?
Right.
And I think you did testify. If you didn't, I'll ask you. think you did testify earlier and question to Mr. Faucitt that she was able to say, while you were tending to her on the ground, on that date of April 22nd, that she was able to confirm that the person who did this to her, he didn't give any name, was still in the house, correct?
Nation did that, not Jamie.
Nation said that.
That's right.
Jamie didn't say that.
Jamie didn't say that.
Okay. But there did come a point after Nation said that this was our friend and he's still in the house, our best friend. You then asked Jamie, is this true? And she replied, yes. Isn't that correct?
If I said it then yes. I don't remember that. But if I told the detective that, then yes. I'm sure my memory was much better within those first, as far as that part.
Sure. One moment, okay?
Sure.
So. Let me show you just marked as defendant's exhibit 7 for identification, which is another portion of that interview with Detective Brady, and ask you to take a look at it's like the third paragraph down.
Okay.
So look at that. Let me know when you're done reading it and see if that helps refresh your recollection about asking Jamie if you asked her to confirm what Nation was saying about whether their best friend did this to them, did this to her at least.
Yes, I said it in here. That she replied yes. I said, "Is this true?" And she replied yes.
So she's on the ground. You're tending to her. You're asking. Nation's volunteering this information, maybe in response to a question your husband Bill might have asked, but in any event, you asked her, "Is this true?" And she answered yes. She was able to answer yes to you on that. Is that correct?
I don't remember today, but I feel pretty confident if I said it at this point in time, then that is correct, and that's what is in my statement.
earlier, if you recalled, you said that you've had to go through a number of interviews over this thing. And again, I understand you didn't ask for any of this to come into your life. It just sort of did. Do you recall having an interview perhaps with the district attorney's office sometime back in July of last year in preparation of this matter possibly coming to trial?
Right.
You do recall?
Yes, they did an interview.
The district attorney's office at that time, July of last year, when Nation asked Jamie, did you confront him? She responded, but you don't know whether she said yes or no or how she responded. Do you remember telling the district attorney's office that?
I remember saying that I didn't know if she answered, but I remember that she looked in his direction.
Right. My question is, do you remember last July telling the district attorney's office that you didn't know how she responded, whether it was a yes or a no?
Correct, because I don't remember her verbalizing yes or no. Yes, that's correct.
Interview on the 26th of April with Detective Brady, okay? And I understand this is almost a couple of years ago, so appreciate your help. Do you remember telling Detective Brady that you had been contacted, by a man who identified himself as a friend of Nation Hahn's, a person by the name of Gary Pierce?
Yes.
That Gary Pierce, he gave you a phone number and was contacting you concerned about the media coverage in the case.
Yes.
And you were asked by Mr. Pierce to send any media requests to another individual by the name of Joyce Fitzpatrick, and you were given a number for that lady, correct?
Yes.
And she was to act as she had been identified for you as the spokesperson for the victim's family in this matter, correct?
Correct.
Very much for your testimony. I have no other questions for you.
Mr. Faucitt, redirect, sir.
No more from the state, Your Honor.
Thank you, ma'am. You may step down.
Do I?
Just leave papers there, please.
Thank you.
Nixie, may I approach and retrieve them there?
We're going to take a recess now, and then you'll have an opportunity to do that. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to recess till 10 minutes till 4. Please recall the instructions. Don't talk among yourselves or with anyone else about the case. No media or independent investigation regarding these matters. Don't form or express opinions, and please have no contact or communication with lawyers, witnesses, or parties. Leave your notepads in your chairs and gather in the deliberation room at 10 minutes till 4. Everyone else, please remain seated.
Not from the state, Your Honor.
Not from the defense, Your Honor.
Being recessed until 10 till.
So is this on the
10 minutes
record?
to 4.
Oh, that's right. This doesn't need to be on the record.